What typically happens when you compromise during a negotiation? Are you afraid that you'll look weak if you compromise during negotiations? Find out why compromise will make the negotiation sweeter for you and the other party. Number one, we're going to take a look at what negotiations actually are and what they're based on. And number two, you're going to learn how to come prepared to compromise so that you get your very best outcome. You ready? Let's go. A negotiation is simply an agreement between two or more parties. Compromise is simply when two or more parties come together and are willing to give up parts of their demands so they can come to a mutual agreement. If you think about it, most negotiations do involve compromise. If you have any type of negotiations between family members, maybe your mate, maybe your children, maybe children aren't the best example. Some parents compromise, other parents are like, nope, you're gonna do what I say. Point is, oftentimes it involves a little bit of give and take. Now, some people don't realize that that's actually a good thing. Is compromise bad? Absolutely not. It is not a weakness. In fact, you should plan on it. I know that we live in a world right now where people make it sound like to get a good deal, you go and you run over everybody else and you make them do what you want and then you win. Arr! Here's the problem. That's not typically going to get you what you want. Even if in the deal you don't compromise at all and you get everything that you want in the negotiations, if the other party didn't see you give up anything, but they're the ones who had to make all the concessions, they're going to resent you. And so let's say that you find a creative, maybe an artist, maybe a photographer, maybe a graphic designer, and let's say that you bulldoze them into cutting their rates in half. You win, right? Yay! Here's the question. Do you think that they're going to deliver the same quality of work for you as they would for another client who happily paid their full fee or close to their full fee? And it doesn't mean that they're intentionally trying to short you. The fact of the matter is, especially with creatives, they have to be motivated to do great work. So that person might deliver something to you that's good, but they're not going to deliver something to you that's great. And so if you want the best possible outcome, that means paying them what they need to make to be happy so that you can get the absolute best delivery from them. So I'm going to share a few strategies that are going to make you feel like a winner when you compromise. Number one, come to the meeting with the thought process that you will likely have to compromise. So if you know what it is that you want out of a deal, make sure that you go in asking for a little bit more than what you want, understanding that you're likely going to compromise to come down. Also, come with a few non-monetary concessions or concessions outside of what's being offered. Okay, well, if you can't do this over here, maybe if we're talking about salary negotiation, okay, maybe you can't hit the salary number. Maybe you're $10,000 off. Well, can I have casual work Fridays? Or can I work from home one day of the week? Do I have access to start getting the paid vacation benefits of someone who's worked here for 10 years instead of someone who's just starting? There's so many things that we can ask for in negotiations if we come prepared to compromise in our mind. If our thought process is, I'm going to come in here and railroad this other person and get everything that I want, if they don't go along with that, now we're caught on the fly trying to figure out what to do, what to ask for. We feel like our egos have been attacked. So don't do that. But also when you're entering into a negotiation, while compromise is good, there is a limit. So also know what is the base amount that you'll accept and still be okay. So I don't mean the base amount that you'll accept so that you don't feel like a total loser. I mean, what's the base amount that you'll accept that's acceptable? And if they get past that line, walk away. So here's the number one rule of negotiations. You have no negotiation power if you're unwilling to walk away. So if the other party knows that no matter what happens, you're going to stay, this is true in personal and business life, by the way, they're not going to give very much. So with that having been said, you know what you want, you've come in a little bit higher, you know what your walk away is, and you have some non-monetary concessions or some alternate things to ask for if the other party asks you to give a little bit here. So those are some great strategies for coming prepared to compromise. Understand that when it comes to negotiations and compromising, culture does play a role. Now, this is something I've learned over the years. Growing up, I've lived in very impoverished neighborhoods. I've also lived in very wealthy neighborhoods. And so when I was in the areas that didn't have as much money, they would have flea markets. And in flea markets, people wanted to debate back and forth. You didn't pay what was the sticker on anything. You got a chance to debate, and that was just part of the game. Well, I remember years ago, I was keynoting for a conference in Accra, Ghana. And the gentleman who was in charge of the event, he took us to the Makola market, which is their big market there. And as the Americans, there's probably about 6 of us. He said, okay, look, he had a few helpers with him. He said, don't buy anything without us. You can walk around a little, but don't buy anything. They will cheat you. Now, I'm an African American that grew up in, again, I spent some time in some poor neighborhoods, right? And so I knew that I knew how to negotiate. So as soon as he, walked away for a moment to help one of the other lost Americans, I was like, psh, I like this dress over here. So I walked over to the stall, and knowing that they had a culture of this back and forth, I came willing to compromise. And so I offered something lower than what I knew the dress was worth. And I mean, I touched the dress. I thought about how much I'd pay for something like that in the US. I added a little bit of a tax because I know people are going to charge Americans a little bit more, and I don't mind paying a little bit more as an American, right? So I added a little tax in my head, but I dropped it beneath what I wanted to pay, knowing they'd want the back and forth. And we actually negotiated. We went back and forth, and they landed on the exact amount I actually wanted to pay. So I had my dress. I was proud. I walked back, and the gentleman who was in charge of the conference saw me, and he said, Sister, what did you do? I told you not to buy anything. He was visually frustrated. He said, and he took it out of my hand. He said, how much did you pay for this? And I told him how many cedis, that's their money, how many cedis I paid. He said, what? I said, that's a good deal. I said, I know. Right? So understand that cultures are a little bit different. And I also saw this when I was working in hotel sales. You know that there's some groups that when they come in, based on their culture, they're going to want to go back and forth. They need to feel like they won something. So you have to inflate the price just slightly for people that come from that cultural background so that you go back and forth and land in the middle. Now, on the off chance that they don't negotiate back and forth, which I've never seen happen, but I believe in having ethics. On the off chance that they don't do that, you don't just charge them the higher rate. You add something extra, or you might come back a few days later and say, you know what? I worked out a special deal for you. This is the actual price we'll charge you. So I want us to be ethical. I don't want people to pay more because they come from a different culture. But understanding that some people, the negotiation process requires compromise. Buying is not the same all over the world. And so enter any negotiation with the understanding that compromise might be necessary. But if both parties walk away feeling like they won something, in Ghana, I got a great price for my dress. But I also know I didn't cheat that market person. I knew that I paid probably a little bit more than someone local would pay, so he was happy too. Those are the best negotiations because now he wants me to come back as a customer. I want to come back. I'm happy with my dress, and I've gotten many compliments over the years on that one particular garment. Before we end, I do want to make one point because occasionally people ask me, what if I can't walk away from this negotiation? And remember I said in personal life and in business, you have to be willing to walk away or you aren't really in a position to negotiate. If you're not able to walk away, you're still not in a position to negotiate. I know that we try to find inclusive ways to make everybody feel better and woo. At the end of the day, if you are trapped in a situation and that other person knows it, they are more likely to take advantage of that fact. So you come doing the best you can, understanding that you might have to compromise, just do your best. But ideally, for you to enter any kind of negotiation with any amount of power, you have to be willing to walk away. So I didn't want to address that because it's a good question people have, and I wanted to address it honestly. I will also share that sometimes we do have the ability to walk away, but we don't know it. So I'll give you an example. Here I am. I own my own business. I have not always owned my own business. And so years ago, there were things that were happening at my job. They weren't willing to correct those things. And so I quit my job without having another job. And many people would say, that's insane. You can't do that. I didn't have any children at the time, so I want to throw that out there. I'm not telling parents to go around and just quit jobs willy-nilly, but I put myself in a very uncomfortable position where I had to sink or swim. But I knew going into that situation, if they weren't willing to hit a few marks, I had to leave. And so that was my leverage. So I say all that to say that sometimes we actually do have the ability to leave. It's just going to make us really uncomfortable for a while. In the end, I ended up getting something better. So if you're entering into any negotiations in the near future, I want you to take a little bit of time to do some planning ahead of time. Understand that other person's position. What are they looking for? What do they want from you? What would make them happy to move forward with you? How can you enter into that negotiation and get what you want out of it and be happy as well? And are there things that you can see happening ahead of time that would work for both of you? Speaking of seeing into the future and planning out what's coming next, you're going to notice in the description of this video, there's a link to download the Future Ready Playbook. This is a playbook that I designed especially for you, and it's chock full of activities that are going to help you future-proof yourself, your career, and your organization.